everybody, Don Murray here with your TVN seasonal severe weather recap. We're going to be recapping all the major severe weather events that occurred throughout meteorological spring, which runs from March 1st ending May 31st. So first we're going to go ahead and start with the month of March, and actually March started off on a rather inactive note. As a lot of you probably know, the month of March started off very slow with very few severe weather events that occurred. However, severe weather season really kicked into high gear starting about March 24th, where we had some very active severe weather days. And here on March 25th was our first real active tornado day, where we had some damage reported here around the Tulsa area. And even down in the Oklahoma City metro area, we had some other activity there that produced a very weak tornado that went through the city of Moore. So let's go ahead and let's analyze March 25th as our first active severe weather day of 2015. Okay, so taking a little closer look into March 25th, which is our first active severe weather day that we're focusing in on. Here is our activity across parts of the southern plains and then extending east into the mid-Mississippi Valley. Let's go ahead and take a closer look into this region and see exactly what had occurred. You can see this larger hail that extended as far east as southern Illinois, but you can see this activity stretching further to the west across parts of southern Missouri, parts of northwestern Arkansas. We had some very large hail, even some tornado reports here around the Fayetteville, Arkansas area. But the one tornado I wanted to note here across parts of northeastern Oklahoma in the Tulsa area on March 25th was, as some of you probably know, is the Sand Springs tornado. And that was just west of Tulsa. Here we have some footage here from storm chasers David Hegner and Josh Alisi as they're traveling eastbound. They see this tornado getting ready to cross the highway. This tornado caused quite a bit of damage in the Sand Springs area, even a few injuries and some fatalities noted with this tornado. So an unfortunate situation with this tornado as it crossed through Sand Springs and into the Tulsa area. One other interesting thing to note about March 25th was in Moore, where we had another weak spin up that occurred here in the metro area. We had some structural damage with this tornado that moved through parts of Moore in the Oklahoma City metro. However, thankfully there was not substantial amount of damage that occurred with that tornado, so we got lucky with this one. So let's go ahead and move on further and take a look at the rest of the month of March and see what exactly happened with severe weather. So taking a look at the rest of March, you can see we had some other scattered activity here move across parts of the south. However, our next real active hail day was on March 31st. Not a lot of tornado activity on March 31st, however, some widespread hail damage from parts of the southern plains extending into parts of the southeast. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at March 31st. Okay, so taking a closer look at March 31st, you can see the activity here across parts of the southern plains extending further to the east, moving into parts of Alabama, and even extending further to the south and east across parts of Georgia, where we had some wind damage reports on the 31st. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at the southern plains, where we did have a lot of large hail activity, a lot of which impacted the Oklahoma City metro area with some large hail between 1 and 1.5 inches in diameter. Also some very high wind reports around the metro area between 70 and 80 mile an hour wind gusts, so some wind damage was noted there. One storm I also wanted to note here was here across parts of southwestern Oklahoma, where we did have a nice video that came out of there. This is a left splitting supercell. You can see this video here. Very large hail with this storm. You can see this nice structure on this storm here. Taking a look further to the east across parts of Arkansas, you see this one notable path right here between 3 and 4 inch diameter detections here across parts of east central Arkansas. Very large hailstorm with that, a lot of damage noted with that storm, and even some more damage noted further to the south and east across parts of Alabama. Extending further to the south and east, this one just missed the Atlanta metro area as it continued to move off to the south and east. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the month of April and see what that had in store throughout our season. Okay, so now let's take a look at April. You can see we had some activity move across parts of the central plains, move across parts of the southeast and midwest. But one event we really want to hone in on is April 9th. Now, April 9th was the day of those large tornadoes that impacted parts of northern Illinois. Some very photogenic tornadoes, however, there was some notable damage across northern Illinois, unfortunately. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at April 9th. You can see where all the active weather was, stretching all the way up here from the upper Midwest, extending further to the south and west, reaching all the way down to parts of North Texas where we had some damaging hail. But the most damaging severe weather on April 9th was up here in northern Illinois. So let's go ahead and take a closer look into northern Illinois and get a better idea at some of these tornado paths. So you can see early on in the day we had some supercells develop here across parts of southeastern Iowa, and you can see this track right here. This tracked into parts of northern Illinois. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of these other tornado reports here. Just to the south of Rockford, we had a couple tornado reports, and further to the south here, Rochelle, was the site of a very violent tornado. Let's actually go ahead and take a look at a video from Rochelle. This is from David Hegner. Look at that large, violent tornado. Very wide tornado, very photogenic, however, ended up causing a lot of damage. So that was just one of many tornadoes here across parts of northern Illinois. Well, let's go ahead and expand the view back out and take a look at the rest of the country on April 9th, because you can see the expansive area of severe weather, again, from northern Illinois, stretching all the way down to Mississippi Valley and even down parts of the south. But even there was another little stretch here across the Ohio River Valley where we had primarily damaging winds. However, there was also some large hail to note. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of April. Okay, so moving along from April 9th, you can see the activity progress across the country. This is a time lapse of the hail activity over the course of April. You can see that we had activity across parts of the southern plains, even move across parts of the south, and even the east kind of on the act. One day I really want to focus in on is April 24th, and you can see this tornado footage here from Fairport, Kansas. You can see, look at the power of this tornado. You see the power flashes from this video here. This is from Reed Timmer when he was out there chasing in Fairport in northern Kansas on April 24th. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of April and see what it had in store for us. Here you can see the activity really kind of started to diminish as we went toward the end of April. However, once we started getting into early May, activity really started to pick up, and we're about ready to go into May right now. So let's see how active the southern plains really got by taking a look at May. Okay, a continuation of the pattern from April. It wasn't really all that active until we get into the first week of May. You can really start to see the southern plains light up. Just watch the southern plains. This is hail activity. We're moving through the month of May, just sitting there battering the southern plains. Now look at it right here, right along the Red River. It just continuously sits here. Let's go ahead and take a look at one active day, which was May 16th. Let's go ahead and take a look at that day in an overview. Okay, so here's a closer look at May 16th. You can see where the active weather was. It stretched all the way up here from parts of the upper Midwest. Central Minnesota got on the act on May 16th, where we had some tornadoes there, and even some isolated activity here across parts of Nebraska, extending into parts of northern Kansas, where we had some larger hail and maybe even some damaging winds here across parts of northern Kansas. But where the activity really focused was here across parts of southwestern Oklahoma and into parts of North Texas. This is where we had many damaging wind reports, large hail reports, and yes, there were even a few tornado reports here, especially across parts of extreme North Texas and into parts of southwestern Oklahoma. Let's actually zoom in on this area and kind of give you a better feel for the May 16th severe weather event here across parts of the Red River Valley. So zooming in, we can see right here, this area right here. This was the one supercell that produced a large tornado as it moved into southwestern Oklahoma. So you can see this path right here. Look at all the large hail and even the damaging wind reports all along this path. And as it's continued into parts of southwestern Oklahoma, right here where you see this tornado icon, this was the Elmer's tornado. And let's actually go ahead and take a look at that video. And you can see this video right here. This shot by TVN's Dick McGowan. Look at the power of this tornado. Fortunately, this did not impact any populated areas, so there wasn't a lot of damage produced. However, you can still see very violent tornado. So that was May 16th. Let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of May. All right, moving along from the 16th, you can see the southern plains continue to be hammered throughout the month of May, just one wave after another, causing damaging hail and flooding rains. There's another day I wanted to talk about though, and this day was a little bit scary situation. We had a nighttime tornado here across parts of southwestern Kansas, and this was the Plains tornado. Now, fortunately, this ended up missing the town of Plains. However, this had some earmarks of the 2007 Greensburg tornado. Now, fortunately, this time it ended up missing a town. However, very violent tornado. Let's actually go ahead and take a look at that video right now. You can see this massive nighttime tornado. You can see it being illuminated by the lightning. But what a powerful tornado this was. And fortunately, it ended up missing the city. Now let's continue on across the month of May, and we can see that the activity continues across the southern plains, just one wave after another. So you can certainly see why we had some flooding issues across parts of the Red River Valley. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the overall statistics and take a look at some of the overall tornado and wind damage maps. Let's go ahead and get to that right now. Okay, so here we're recapping all the tornado activity throughout the springtime months. So this is running from March 1st, ending May 31st. Look at all the tornado activity and where it has been most active here, especially here across parts of the central plains, extending down across the Red River Valley, and here in the parts of central Texas. This is where the most tornado activity has been throughout the springtime. Now, there have been a few exceptions here, especially here across parts of northern Illinois. This is what we talked about April 9th with those violent tornadoes that moved across parts of northern Illinois. But where did Dixie Alley go this year? Well, it really wasn't all that active. You can see here across parts of the deep south, here moving into parts of the southeast. Only a few scattered tornado reports, but no real major outbreaks across parts of the southeast. So that's one thing to note about this spring season, is Dixie Alley really wasn't lit up like it had been the past few years. And again, looking back here across parts of the southern plains, again, we talked about some of the major tornado events here across parts of Oklahoma and even here in central Kansas. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the wind damage reports we saw across parts of the United States during our springtime months. Okay, so here is an overview map of all the wind damage reports that occurred throughout the springtime months, again starting from March 1st, ending May 31st. You can see this sea of blue here that stretches here from the southern plains and moves throughout the southeast and up to the parts of the northeast. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot more wind damage reports. You get those tree limbs coming down, power lines. This is just all those reports that came into the National Weather Service offices throughout that time period. So again, definitely active with wind damage reports. So there is your severe weather recap for meteorological spring. But there's one thing we're going to talk about next. We're going to go to Lily Dixon, who's going to analyze the flooding situation and the drought conditions that have dramatically improved here across parts of the southern plains. So let's go to Lily now and discuss a little more about that situation.
Thanks, Don. Hey everyone, my name is Lily Dixon, and today we're going to be reviewing the drought progression of the spring season. So the first thing that you see is the western portions of the United States are extremely dry, and unfortunately this will continue to stay true throughout the entire spring season. So let's go ahead and start this time lapse and take a look at the southern portions of the United States up into the northern plains. So the first thing that you see in the month of March is the drought will actually worsen throughout March up into the northern plains and as well into the southeastern parts of the United States. But once we begin to hit mid-April into May, you will see these conditions lessen in the southeastern portions of the United States as well as the southern plains. And once we hit May, you will also see that there are not a lot of drought conditions here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the reason for that and take a look at the precip accumulation maps. So taking a look at March, as you can see, the southwestern portions of the United States are extremely dry, as well as in the southern plains up into the northern plains. But as we move into April, you'll begin to see this pattern change. As the Gulf moisture moves forward, you see those precip totals go right up. But as we move into the month of May, you'll begin to see how extreme the precipitation totals were in the southern plains. In fact, let's talk about a couple of the statistics that went along with the month of May in the southern plains. So in May alone, there were 594 flash flood warnings in Oklahoma and in Texas. And just to give you an idea of how extreme that was, that's 94 more flash flood warnings than there were the previous year combined. So that's crazy. So also to note, Oklahoma had the wettest month on record at 14.40 inches, and in Texas they also had the wettest month on record at 8.81 inches, which is 2 more inches than the previous year in June 2004. So now let's go to extreme meteorologist Reed Timmer with his thoughts on the upcoming summer season.
Hi, this is extreme meteorologist Reed Timmer with a severe weather outlook for the rest of severe weather season 2015. Our main driver in the climate system so far, of course, is El Nino, which is still ramping up in the tropical Pacific Ocean. It was partially responsible, at least, for the historic rainfall event across the southern plains and the above normal tornado season that we saw during the month of May. There were 410 preliminary tornado reports. That's prelim, not actual, but still well above the 173 three-year average for preliminary tornado reports during May alone. And also there were historic rainfall amounts over the southern plains. Oklahoma City recorded its wettest May ever on record with 19.48 inches during the month of May 2015 alone. Dallas also recorded its wettest May on record with just over 16 inches, and Norman had nearly 2 feet of rain fall during the month of May alone. And all of that was because of a very strong and active subtropical jet stream that was interacting with the polar front jet stream to the west of the southern plains, digging those high amplitude troughs across the western U.S. and just pummeling the southern plains with impulse after impulse with severe weather and heavy rainfall. And while it did break the historic drought that was in place from 2012 through 2014 across the southern plains, that very heavy rainfall was also associated with hail, deadly flooding, and tornadoes. Thankfully, there were only 7 deaths attributed to tornadoes during 2015 so far, during the month of May alone, but still, that's 7 way too many. Now it looks like the focus for severe weather has shifted to the central and northern plains. Tomorrow we expect an outbreak of severe weather with possible tornadoes across central and eastern North Dakota into northern South Dakota. It could be the first of the very active northern plains season expected ahead. And then we expect western Kansas and northeast Colorado to southwest Nebraska to be active on Wednesday with supercells, tornadoes, and more hail expected. And then it looks like there should be a dry pattern that will emerge over the southern and central plains with possible more severe weather for the weekend. In the longer term, we expect El Nino to ramp up, becoming one of the strongest we've ever seen in recorded history, even stronger than 1997-98 El Nino. And we expect that really to begin ramping up toward the end of the summer through the fall. And so then it looks like there'll be a quiet period across the central and southern plains and southern U.S. with dry conditions building in. But we do expect the central and northern plains to continue to be active, especially ramping up across mid to late June, as we've seen time and time again over the past several years with that June 15 to June 17 period being active. And it looks like the central and northern plains will really ramp up for mid to late June after this first initial system. I expect more tornadoes and hail for the central and northern plains, possibly across the Great Lakes region for mid to late June. And then that axis will shift into Canada for July. But I'd expect the central and southern U.S. to ramp up once again this fall as the subtropical jet, being above average, begins to ramp up and interact with that polar front jet. And then I bet that the central and southern plains across the southern U.S. will be very wet and active for severe weather this fall. And with the current El Nino ramping up to be even stronger, likely than 1997-98 El Nino, and we expect that to continue through the next winter, I would bet there'll be above normal severe weather season for the winter across the southern U.S. and the Gulf Coast region, including Florida as well, as this El Nino takes hold of the Pacific Ocean. So be safe the rest of the storm season, especially across the central and northern plains. This is a severe weather outlook from extreme meteorologist Reed Timmer with TVN and Storm Damage Services.
Don't forget to check out Storm Chasers streaming live at tvnweather.com/live. Or if you're on the go, you can watch live Storm Chasers streaming on your mobile device by downloading the TVN Weather app on your Android or iOS device.